The human fossil record consisted mostly of few bones of the late Neanderthals. Molecular data from DNA and protein sequences shows that our common ancestors are chimpanzees. We diverged from our joint common ancestor about 7 million years ago. Sahelanthropus represents the earliest human ancestor. We can't tell if Sahelanthropus had the ability to walk, but what we can see is the hole in the skull through which the spinal cord passes through. It's farther forward than the knuckle-walking apes, and the hole is set farther forward in humans as well. This suggests that bipedal walking was one of the first evolutionary characters to distinguish us from other apes. This leads us into transitional forms. A transitional form is fossils or organisms that show the intermediate states between an ancestor and that of its descendant. Lucy, also known as Australopithecus afarensis, also walked on two legs. We can tell because as found, the femur connects to the pelvis at one end and the knee at its other. If you take a primate fossil, you can tell whether the creature walked on two legs or four by looking at how the femur fits. Lucy's angle and pelvis looked very similar to that of modern humans. Lucy is a great example of a transitional form between ancient humans and ancient apes. From the neck up, she is ape-like. In the middle, she is a mixture of ape-like and modern human. And from the waist down, she is almost modern human. Her arms are longer than modern humans, but shorter than chimps. This also tells us that our upright posture was evolved before our brain. Another form of transitional form was the Tiktaalik. The Tiktaalik was a fish on land and in water. It had a flat head and also had a neck. Tiktaalik is the most important transitional form in regards to the evolution of tetrapods. Transitional forms are the use of fossils to reconstruct evolutionary relationships with lineages over time, assuming common descent has allowed paleontologists to predict the characteristics of transitional forms that have not been within the fossil record. Another great leap in human evolution was the ability to make and use tools. The first tool-using human was Homo habilis, whose remains first appear about 2.5 million years ago. Habilis means handyman, and does show changes towards a more human-like form, including shorter teeth and a larger brain. There is swelling on part of the brain's left lobe that is associated with speech and comprehension. Homo habilis also lived with three species: Homo ergaster, Homo rudolfensis, and Homo erectus. Homo erectus is the first hominy to leave Africa, because its remains have been found in China, Indonesia, Europe, and Middle East. The brain size and skeletal structure of Erectus was very similar to that of humans. Homo erectus was around for 1.5 million years, disappearing from the fossil record about 300,000 years ago. We assume that it may have left two descendants, Neanderthals and sapiens. Around 28,000 years ago, the Neanderthal fossils vanished. There are two theories regarding as to what happened to them. The first theory is called multi-regional theory, which states that Erectus and Neanderthals evolved into sapiens independently in several areas because of natural selection. The second theory was the out-of-Africa theory, which states that Homo sapiens originated in Africa and spread, physically replacing Erectus and Neanderthals because they might have been outcompeted by food or killed. Genetics in the fossil record supports the out-of-Africa theory. Darwin predicted that fossils that start off ape-like and become more and more like humans as time passes. It's a fact that our divergence from the ancestor of chimps happened in East or Central Africa about 7 million years ago, and the bipedal walking evolved before the large brains, and we even know many species existed at the same time, sometimes even at the same place. What we see in the human fossil record is complex adaptations such as upright posture and remodeled skulls, which both involve changes in anatomy. So there's no doubt that natural selection was involved. Even without fossils, there's evidence of human evolution from comparative anatomy, embryology, our vestigial traits, and even biogeography. There are 5 evolutionary predictions and trends supported by the fossil record: increasing complexity with time, early species that have character traits in common with the descendants of later species, fossils living in recent layers should resemble the species living in that area today, and evolutionary changes between lineages should be evident. Increasing complexity with time is shown in the fossil record. assuming that current species evolved from ancient species. This predicts the emergence of complexity from simpler forms. For example, in humans, we see our brains have evolved larger from what our common ancestor, the adult chimp. This shows that as time increases, so does complexity. Later species will have traits in common with descendants of earlier species. If mammals are descendants of reptiles, we should expect fossils of reptiles to become more mammal-like. For example, Archaeopteryx dinosaur has feathers and so do birds. Birds share the same feature of the Archaeopteryx dinosaur. Fossils in recent layers should be similar to the current living species. Recent fossils begin to resemble the species living in the area today. For example, we found fossils in Australia very common to the animals living in Australia. We found marsupials, which include animals with pouches, for example, like kangaroos and koalas. Last but not least, we should be able to predict the evolutionary changes within lineages will be evident. For example, in humans, we should be able to figure out the ancestral traits for chimps. We should also be able to reconstruct the phylogenetic relationships among groups, and it enables the recognition of intermediate stages, which are the transitional forms. When comparing protein sequences between humans and chimps, there is a 1.5% difference in amino acids. This is actually a big difference considering amino acids are essential to building our bodies. This then means that the difference is 80% in at least one amino acid. When comparing genes, there were differences found in protein sequence of gene, presence of genes, and the number of copies of genes. There's also a difference in when and where the genes are expressed during development. Difference between humans and chimps are among anatomy, physiology, behavior, language, brain size, and configuration. In genomic scans and comparing DNA sequences, there are differences found in genes involved in the immune system, gametic formation, cell death, sensory perception, and nerve formation. Races are considered subspecies or ecotypes. It tells us that the populations were separated and long enough to make genetic divergence occur. Not much genetic variation relates to race. Among races, there is little to no correlation of genetic variation in the physical traits to determine race. It is obvious that the physical variation in races is seen and arbitrary, but when it comes to genetic variation, we don't see it. This is because the genetic variation in race are minor. Races between humans are physical aspects, so we can't say that they're different due to genetic instances. The reason why it is different physically is because of the mating and sexual selection. Cultures sometimes share the same interests and attractions towards mates. That's why cultures virtually physically look the same, and this is called gene culture evolution. We can conclude that the race is not determined by genes of a population, but the physical characteristics.
Selection has produced differences between populations within ethnic groups. An example of this is that some human populations are able to digest lactose post-infancy, while others lack the enzyme to digest lactose. Populations that have the genes that code for lactase retain the reproductive advantage over lactose intolerant populations. That is because they are able to obtain nutrition from an extra source. Genetic analysis shows the lactase gene arose between 3,000 to 8,000 years ago, which corresponds with the domestication of cows in pastoral populations. This is proof that selection has acted on the human population within the last few thousands of years. Due to improvements in medical care, sanitation, and nutrition, many detrimental alleles found in human populations are not necessarily called like they would have been in the past. Now we can compensate for these bad alleles using different technologies we have developed. The reverse is also true in that genes that would serve to benefit humans in the past, such as an affinity for sweets and fats that were once rare, has in modern times led to obesity and tooth decay, now that sweets and fatty foods are plentiful. Now that many detrimental alleles can persist in humans, there is some speculation as a species we are devolving. However, there are some people that will die before reproducing, and some will produce more offspring than others. Thus, natural selection may still act upon human populations. Anything that increases viability and fecundity of offspring will lead to evolutionary changes. The questions most humans are really concerned about are whether we as a species are becoming better, stronger, faster, or more attractive. These questions depend on whether traits we desire are actually giving individuals reproductive advantages. Scientists cannot know the answer to these questions. However, we have developed a society for ourselves in which the most important character one can acquire is social improvement. Humans are the products of the same evolutionary processes that occurred in other mammals or species. Although humans have advanced by leaps and bounds than any other before seen species, we are essentially animals. Evolution does not occur with a goal or to reach some sort of perfection. Instead, we will continue evolving to the conditions of our environment.
There's evidence for evolution, but some people don't believe it. They say that evolution is convincing, but they're not convinced. How are they not convinced when there's so much evidence from many areas such as the fossil record, biogeography, embryology, vestigial structures, and suboptimal design? This is evidence that organisms evolved. Evidence from these studies support the truth in evolution, that species evolved from common ancestors. There's no evidence that proves evolution untrue. For example, we don't find fossils out of evolutionary order, and we don't find humans existing with dinosaurs. From the experiments and evidence, we can conclude that organisms evolved, lineages split from a common ancestor, and natural selection drives adaptation. Evolution can also be tested through predictions. The prediction of where fossils will be found was proven true when Darwin predicted that the human ancestors would be found in Africa. Another prediction was when a common ancestor would appear, when the prediction of a fish pod was found in a 370-million-year-old rock. Another prediction through evolution is what those ancestors would look like. This was proven with the missing link between ants and wasps. Evolution is proven true through a lot of events, but there are still questions and concepts that are not explained and we don't understand. There are still questions on sexual selection, such as how does it even work, and how do females even select males? Another question is how does genetic drift affect DNA sequences or features in organisms? Can we detect which fossil hominins are the direct connection to the Homo sapiens? And what caused the Cambrian explosion, where a large variety of animals appeared just within a few million years? These questions are what the non-believers of evolution hold on to. They want to say that because it cannot be fully explained, then it is not much of a convincing theory. The controversies and questions in science is what drives the study, discovery, and progress. However, skeptics will not agree. The problem in accepting evolution is not with the evidence. There will still be non-believers where evolution will still not be accepted no matter how much evidence is provided. To them, evolution provides questions of purpose, morality, and meaning, and they're not ready to accept it. The problem isn't with believing who our phylogenetic ancestors are, it's with the moral values they hold on to. It is believed that there is more at stake than just a scientific theory. Worldviews of science are naturalism and materialism. Naturalism is the view that the only way to understand the world and the universe is through the scientific method. Materialism is the view that the only reality in the universe is the physical matter, excluding thoughts, feelings, emotions, and etc. Evolution is a theory of the pattern and process of life, whereas the non-believers of evolution want something to describe the meaning of life. Evolution just tells us how we got here, not what we're here for. They want to know what our reason for existing is, but there's no rhyme or reason. It was just a purposeless force. Evolution is something that people cannot believe in because they want meaning, purpose, ethics, and moral guidance in their lives. This is something that evolution does not provide.
Some people believe that by recognizing humans as evolved animals, we must behave in a corresponding way. Firstly, it is important to note that the proverbial law of the jungle is a simplified way for explaining how animals and nature interact. Animals also participate in their own complex societies and form corresponding relationships. Evolutionary theory does not make the claim that humans are hardwired to act like beasts. There are genes in humans that will produce in us selfish behaviors due to the competitive nature of survival, but there are also genes that drive giving behaviors. Many human behaviors may have originated from evolutionary adaptations. Humans, for most of our existence, lived as hunter gatherers or lived otherwise nomadic lives. Only recently have humans come together to live in civilizations with advanced technologies. This means that selection has had vastly more time to adapt us to our previous lifestyle versus the more at ease lifestyle we are currently accustomed to living in. It is a strong possibility that we have retained some adaptations we acquired during our past existence as a nomadic species. There are some human behaviors that appear to be universally found in all populations. Male dominance, familial bonds, language, and religious beliefs appear to be universal. Surely some traits arose as adaptive behaviors, but not all human behaviors can be explained by adaptation. Our genes appear to be responsible for many human traits, but they are not the only factor. Environmental conditions can also drive behaviors, and although humans are capable of terrible atrocities, we are also capable of great empathy. Many altruistic acts cannot be explained by genetics. Recognizing the theory of evolution as a fact does not equal a world with no morals, ethics, or purpose. Evolutionary theory does not provide a guide on how humans must act. Evolution only aims to explain how some behaviors have come to be. Through all our adaptations, one incredible thing has resulted. Humans have developed the special ability to understand our own evolution and other laws that govern our universe.